Hi, everyone. My name is Beth Gilligan from the Coolidge Corner Theatre. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this very special Q&A for the new documentary, Sing Me a Song. If you haven't seen it already, it's a really extraordinary film. It's currently streaming right now at coolidge.org or at an art house theater near you. I know we have folks from Film Forum and a few other places, I think Denver, tuning into this Q&A. So please support your local art house anytime you do. We're all nonprofit organizations. It helps sustain us through what has been a very challenging 9 months. So please, and also as a bonus, you get to see a wonderful film. So again, the film is Sing Me a Song, and we're thrilled to have a very special panel today. But before we get started, just a few words of thanks. First to our sponsor, our main sponsor, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, to Doran Weber, who's their VP of programs there. With his support and support of the foundation, the Coolidge has been able to award grants to art house cinemas all over the country. We're, I think, at 86 independent cinemas nationwide, so they can start or sustain their own Science on Screen program. And I probably forgot to say, this is a Science on Screen Q&A. You probably caught on to that by now. Ruben Anders Scientific and our series founder, Richard Anders, and Ellen Hoffman and Ken Loveday, who are Brookline residents who support the program. And also thank you to Chris Lane and everyone from Participant Media for making today's conversation possible. So we are thrilled to be joined by the filmmaker today, Thomas Balmès, and by Dr. Michael Rich. Thomas is an independent director and producer of influential nonfiction films since 1992. His films include A Decent Factory, Babies, which was a big hit back in the day at the Coolidge when we could all gather in person, and Happiness, which is made in Bhutan and introduced audiences to Pionki and his village of Laya. Happiness premiered at the 2014 Sundance Film Festival, where it won the Documentary World Cinema Cinematography Award. And one of the really breathtaking things about Sing Me a Song is also the cinematography in this film. Dr. Michael Rich is a professor of pediatrics at Harvard Medical School and associate professor of social and behavioral sciences at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. He is the founder of the Center on Media and Child Health and the first evidence-based medical program addressing mental, physical, and social health issues associated with digital technology, the Clinic for Interactive Media and Internet Disorders. They both have lengthier bios. I know Dr. Rich was also an assistant director for Akira Kurosawa, which immediately just stood out to me. I would encourage you to seek those out online, but we're gonna get started with the conversation today. So thank you both for joining us this afternoon. I wanted to start with the film. So Thomas, as we mentioned in your bio, this is a subject you had visited before, and indeed sort of the opening scenes of the film is some footage from Happiness, which I understand you wrapped shooting of in a few years earlier than that, around 2011. Can you give us some background as to what drew you to, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Pionki in Bhutan for the first film in the first place?
So, I mean, originally the idea was really to do a film about the impact of technology and more precisely of screens and more precisely even of mobile phones on our generation and on the planets. And at the beginning, I was thinking of like doing the film even in the US or in South Korea or in a place where the impact had been existing for a long time. And after a while, I realized it would be more interesting in going in a place, in a location where this was new and I could follow someone through the different stages of like all the impact that it could have on one person. And then not that many countries where these screens were not existing. And this is what brought me to Bhutan. And then after picking up Bhutan as a country, I had to find a village which was not yet connected. And there were like only a few of them. One was like a 2 weeks walk trip from the capital to the village. So it was a bit long to connect. Then I decided to go to Laya, which was already kind of a very complicated trip. I had to walk for 2 days up to 4,000 meters high to arrive at the village. And when I picked up the village, then I had to go and find someone who had never left the village, who had never experienced anything I wanted to speak about. And this is how I picked up Pionki among the 900 villagers of Laya. Yeah, he and his mother were spending most of the time looking after the yak, and he was about to go into the monastery, and he was like a very special child, very sad and very joyful in the same time. And there was something always reminding me of Jean-Pierre Léaud in the film 100 Blows with him, you know, something like I could spend days observing him and never getting bored. And so I thought this is maybe the right character I should pick up. And then I was supposed, in fact, to do Sing Me a Song when I planned to do Happiness. But because of crazy monsoons and heavy rains, the road which was supposed to bring electricity was totally wiped out and destroyed. And I had to do another film, which waiting middle of television on Happiness, and then which pushed me to return a few years later and to do my original project, which is Sing a Song. But I always say that it's not like Sing a Song is a sequel of Happiness is a prequel of Sing Me a Song, because the original idea is really was always to follow the effect of this arrival of technology in a village.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I know there, in reading some of the reviews, there are a lot of comparisons to Michael Apted's 7 Up series, or films like Hoop Dreams, where they sort of stay with a subject over a course of many years. And it's just striking to see sort of the difference between him as a young boy and as a teenager. Had you stayed in touch with the family over the years? Did you have any sense, when you returned to Bhutan to do Sing Me a Song, did you have any sense of what you would find or what was going on in anyone's life?
Well, I always kept in touch. I always had some regular news, and I always had like some local fixer with whom I'd been working on Happiness, who were going regularly in the monastery and keeping me updated with the situation. I have to say that I didn't really know, and I was not sure that I would do this film. It's just like one day I was working on a very big project in the US, and finally the thing was delayed because of a permission problem. And then I said, maybe it's time for me to go back to Bhutan. And I just flew there. And the first thing I saw arriving in the monastery is this shot of all the monks praying and playing on the mobile in the same time. And when I saw this, I just said, well, that's for sure there is another film to be done. And this is what convinced me, and I think convinced all the other partners, like Participants and Arte in France, to really go on and do the film.
Yeah, and that's such a striking moment in the film, certainly. You capture a lot of. It's interesting. You talked about other locations. You were thinking of maybe doing a film about technology, because I think there are so many universal things in this film, and one of them is online dating. And somebody, I met my husband via Match.com, but I know it's hard to have an internet dating experience where you meet someone and they're exactly as published. So I thought, there are moments of humor. I thought when he first meets, I'm possibly mispronouncing her name, Yu Yen, and she's like, oh, I thought I told you that I had a child. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how that unfolded and how she became involved in the film and how that came together.
Well, when I started filming in the monastery, I realized that Pionki was spending a lot of time on different WeChat groups, WeChat being a kind of Chinese WhatsApp and Instagram all mixed together. And on which they like exchange different kind of things. And he was part of a group where they were like singing, another one that were like telling stories about ghosts, another one where they were speaking among monks about all the problems they had in the monastery. And he was part of like 20 groups like that. And among one of the group, there was one where he was keeping on going and exchanging songs with this girl. And when I realized that eventually he was thinking of going to town to meet her, I just asked him if I could go and meet her and potentially start filming her parallelly. And he said, yeah, no problem. And then I did that. And then I didn't know if they would finally meet, but I decided for a while to shoot both in town and in the monastery, and until at one stage he decided to leave the monastery, not for always, but for a while, and meeting her.
Yeah.
But this was very natural and very simple. And I think exactly as you mentioned, this is exactly happening everywhere. And in the same way, even if some people are really in state of shock when they see him praying and playing in the mobile phone at the same time, you really have to understand that the kind of monastery is staying in is not something he's been really deciding to go to. There is no kind of really parents push the kids to go there, and this is not something because there is a very strong Buddhist belief. So it's like kind of school, you know. And I always say that my kids, when I come back home and they're like 15 and 16, I go in their room and they're like supposed to read this and that, and I go a little bit behind the book and there is a smartphone. So I think every kid all over the world is both doing his studies and using his smartphone at the same time. This is again something quite universal, I think.
Yeah, I think that seems like a good segue to Dr. Rich. So I know you've been exploring children and media exposure for many years, but I'm going to assume most of the work you've done has probably been outside of Bhutan, and with parents and children who've had much longer term exposure to both the internet and television. In watching this film, were you surprised to see sort of the level of screen immersion and focus that's depicted?
Not at all, because it's very similar to what we see here in the US and actually around the world. I also have done work in Europe and Canada and Australia. And this is a universal issue. And in many ways, we're approaching this as an environmental health issue. If you think about it, we can no longer afford to look at these devices or the content on them as vectors of either harm or education or communication. They're the air we breathe. We are spending more time on screens than we are doing anything else during our waking hours. And I think that instead of wringing our hands and saying, the world is gone to hell in a handbasket, we need to understand how to live with them. I think the one thing that really struck me about this film is that our experience has been like boiling the frog, where we have introduced these technologies in a gradual way so that we haven't really noticed it. But when Pionki goes into this, it's like hitting a brick wall at 60 miles an hour. And it's a dramatic change. And one of the great things about doing this in another culture is it allows us to see ourselves, is it allows us in the third person to experience something and then examine ourselves and say, OMG.
Yeah, no, and that was certainly a reaction. And I think, especially with the pandemic, the past 9 months or so, just anecdotally speaking, I know I have two pretty young kids. I don't know any parents who've said, oh, we've really been able to clamp down on screen time during this time. It's been quite the opposite. And
I think one of the interesting things is how the dialogue or the issue has changed. Frankly, this was in existence before the pandemic and lockdowns, but that has sort of forced us to look at it. But the issue is not about screen time or limiting screen time. The issue is about the content you're using the screens for and the context in which you're using them. And is this advancing our knowledge, our connectedness with each other? I really feel in many ways that we use these tools kind of mindlessly. We embrace them as the latest bright, shiny thing. And instead of really thinking about not only what am I doing with these technologies, but what am I not doing because I'm using these technologies?
Yeah, and I think it's in terms of content, one of the striking scenes in the film was when they have the toy guns and they're playing, and you see some of the violent games that they're playing, and that was another thing. I don't know if that was surprising to you, Thomas, and because I think there's this image you have of monasteries. or at least the outside world has. It seems like as you just said, it's more of a school-like environment, as places of peace and contemplation. So to see boys being boys, really.
Well, you have to understand and realize that when in 1998, the King of Bhutan allowed television to arrive in the country, the 28 channels they got, among the 28 channels they got, the only two things they were watching like 15 hours a day were like American wrestling and porn. So among everything they could watch, National Geographic, CNN and everything, the two channels they just picked up and preferred were American wrestling and porn. So I don't know what Michael can say about that, but
Great. Throw it to me now. Well, if you think about it, both wrestling, violence, and porn are appealing to universal primal human drives, right? That they're going to, and because they had never had access to those things, they go to that. I mean, this is why people make cheap horror films, because they translate around the world very easily. You don't have to develop character, you don't have to have good dialogue, but life and death is something everybody can relate to, as is sexual desire. So I think that that's pretty normal if you think about it. And again, it was like going from 0 to 60 instantaneously, rather than, gradually, the way the West has, if you will, Europe and the US and other countries. So I think that is very, very expected, really, from what we are seeing. I do think that one of the really interesting things, as you were talking about WeChat and online dating and all of that, is that, again, this is about how we are using these technologies rather than the technologies themselves. That unfortunately, one of the things that has gotten us in trouble with social media is that we have used social media much the way that corporations do, which is to market ourselves to the world. You did Match.com. I'm sure you didn't put a profile picture of you right when you got out of bed in the morning before you had a shower, right? I mean, we
be single, Michael.
we do that. We put our best foot forward, but the other side of that is, by doing so, we are essentially marketing ourselves to the world, whether it's to get a date, whether it's to sell an idea or sell a product. And what we're not doing yet, but could do, is be authentic, be our genuine selves. And then we would be able to use this near infinite connectivity to deepen and broaden our connectedness with each other and with the world. Yet what we've done has essentially undermined our connectedness in the deep and sustaining ways that humans are connected with each other.
Yeah, I think, and Thomas, you hinted at sort of a little bit of a generational divide, just, parents sending the children to the monastery. And, the film is primarily focused on Pionki and his fellow students. And I know his mother's in the film very briefly. But did you sense, in terms of the technology usage, I mean, was there sort of parental disapproval of that, or were the parents also did you find that they had their heads buried in the phone, or the elders at the monastery?
In the monastery, all the head monk and all the people in charge are even maybe worse than the kids and the students. When I was going in the evening to speak about a potential shoot on the next day and speak to the adults, they were not playing with one mobile, but with two mobiles and one screen and a computer, and like having 3-4 screens in front of them. And not to put them into trouble, I didn't edit some shots I had with some of the head monks saying, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And at the same time, his phone was ringing in the conversation. Oh, sorry. And it was a Facebook call from wherever. So I think it's going on every generation. Maybe the mother of Pionki, who is really older, doesn't get into that. And she has a very regular old phone and she doesn't understand. Also, shots which I didn't edit with all of the kids having a dinner at home, and she was by herself looking in her plate when all the kids, 6 of them, were like just all on the phone, which again is something I've been observing worldwide, and even in the US or in France or everywhere. So I would say that the situation is really exactly almost the same as anywhere. And they just went from 0 to become, in a few years, the biggest consumer of screens of all Asia. So they're just like, the fact of not having any culture, any distance, any kind of like background of understanding of the potential bad effect of that, they just went into it with absolutely no thought about the potential threat that it could come with. And again, I think maybe Michael can comment on that. It's just when you've been waiting for so long and you don't have our history with this. I mean, you know, we had TV and then internet and then this mobile phone. They went straight to all that in such a short time, which makes it very complicated for them to take it with measures.
Yeah,
yes,
the parents.
I would actually speak to that. I actually, at one point in my career, did university health at a college. And one of the issues we had was there were some freshmen who would not show up at class because they were sitting watching General Hospital marathons. And when you talk to them, they were the ones whose parents sort of said, self-righteously, we don't have a television in our home. We don't do that stuff. And so frankly, after I do a talk for parents and teachers, there are usually a couple of parents who very self-righteously say, we don't have a television in our home. We don't have phones. We don't have computers. And my response is, go get them. Because you need to parent your child in this digital space. Otherwise, you're not preparing them to be critical thinkers and users in effective ways of these very powerful tools. And they're going to fall into that vortex that Thomas was seeing in Bhutan.
I totally agree with you, and I've been experimenting that with my own kids, and I think it was the biggest mistake I could ever have done was really to forbid all of them to have any kind of screen at home, and at the end you can't deal with it. And I think this is the last thing to do, and you really have to think on how to speak about it and try to learn. And this is also something kind of amazing for me, is how little schools all over the world do teach media, do try to spend at least a few minutes, a few hours a week to try to educate the kids with what it means to be addicted to this and that, and how the social media and all the video games make you addict like drug addicts. And people say that potentially the parents should do that, but I think it's very difficult for the parents to do it. And to me, there should be some time in school being spent on trying to educate the kids with these addictions.
Well, it depends on all of us. I mean, I think it's the schools, the parents, and one of the things that I think does exist in terms of the difference between generations is that the kids are so naturally facile with these tools that a lot of parents just basically check out of parenting them in the digital space. If you think about it, we talk about online and offline. Kids don't think about it as online and offline. It is one seamless environment for them. It is one, it is part of their reality. And a lot of parents sort of say, wow, my kid's so much better at TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat than I am. At least they're not selling drugs or having sex, right? And so they basically step back and don't parent in the digital space. And so that's another thing I really encourage parents to do, is be present in your child's digital life, because they're spending as much time or more time there than they are anywhere else. Yeah. And this is our opportunity to teach them to function well and to use these tools in ways that help them be smarter and healthier and kinder to each other.
Yeah, so we have a couple questions coming in from our YouTube audience. One of them, on a somewhat related note, is after seeing the film, did Pionki have the reaction some have had too, about too much screen time? I guess the first question is, has he seen the film, and did he have sort of like a, whoa, I guess maybe I should put the phone down kind of reaction, or was he okay with it?
Okay, so I mean, well, he saw the film first in Bhutan when I came back to show it to him. But I would say the big reaction and the big kind of thoughts he had was coming after Toronto, where we had like 2 days of nonstop interviews with journalists who were asking him about everything. And then he came to me and he said, well, I realize it's not that good to spend that much time on the phone, and I think I'm going to change that. And he really did change what he's doing now with his phone, and instead of spending days on social network and all that, is being more active and is directing the other monks in the monastery by asking them to do this kind of dance and doing some kind of fake Bollywood films. And he is being very active, and I think it's a very positive impact of the film on his relationship to his phone, at least.
Great. And another question is, curious to know where Pionki is now and what he's been up to these days. Is he still meeting people on WeChat, and is he still at the monastery? I guess you partly answered that.
He's back in the monastery, and we communicate very regularly on different on Facebook or Instagram, and he's very happy. But he told me that he wants to be just outside of the monastery and spending his day in the monastery and being able to go outside in the evening. He wants to teach the younger monks how to play the trumpet, and he does want to have the freedom of someone who is not living there and being a monk. So he wants to have one foot there and another foot outside. And regarding his relationship with the dating online, he doesn't speak to me too much about it.
Understandable. So I'm curious, I think the film, there, as I said, there are some beautiful, striking images where they're all immersed in their phones, and it's sort of easy in some ways to see the downsides of being on the internet constantly. Did you find, were there positives in the new connectivity in Bhutan that you found in the course of filmmaking? And I guess, Dr. Rich, if you could speak to some of the positives of the screen exposure.
Go ahead.
I mean, I can speak briefly, but from what I hear regarding the positive is like, I hear a lot them telling me it's great for us to allow us to connect one with another. We live like days away from our parents or from our family, so we can keep on communicating with them. So that's one big thing. Another thing is like education and learning about the world. You really have to understand the country was really, until 1998, totally closed to the outside world. So this kind of huge window for them to understand what's going on outside. And then, but then I really want to emphasize that I think, like everywhere, but in a smaller society, it's also brought huge problem of like in families, in terms of violence inside of the families, and in terms of like school, and in terms of attention. And we, exactly like in the West, the capacity for the kids to stay at school and to be concentrated on something just collapsed. And according to many teachers I spoke to, the education system is really getting more difficult since this arrived. But I think it's the same thing worldwide. So I think there is nothing specific. And as Michael says, there is no way we can go back and totally get rid of all this technology, even if it's interesting to see that all the people who are creating this technology in the Silicon Valley, all the people who are creating Facebook, all the people who are creating Instagram, don't allow their kids to have any screen at all, and bring them to like Montessori school and to alternative way of education, and are really tough with this. And there are like documentaries and where you have all these people speaking that you can easily find, and I find it very interesting for the parents to watch. But there's something in between to invent, and I don't have the exact detail on how to do it, but if potentially we can raise discussions with this film on this impact that it has on every generation, I think this is what I try to do.
And I would say there are many positives about the technology that we're not yet taking advantage of. I am often asked, we've let the genie out of the bottle. Now what do we do? And my response is to learn to dance with the genie. You learn to use these powerful tools in mindful ways and to use them in directed ways. I am, as a pediatrician, just, optimistic and altruistic enough to believe that social media actually can be an instrument of peace. If kids around the world are connecting with each other in authentic ways, and their leaders, their political leaders, tell them that they are the enemy, they're going to say, I know these kids better than I know you. Why should I listen to you about picking up a weapon and going after them? And so, I believe that we really need to be literate to these tools. We put a lot of energy and effort, into helping our kids be literate to the printed word. And yet now they are getting way more of their information, and especially their experiential information, online than they are from a book. And so I think we really have to shift our education to help us be critical thinkers, help us use these tools in effective ways, and responsible ways, and also to be conscious of what we're doing with them, in the sense that what we do there is not just to receive, but to create and send. And so we need to mindfully create, recognizing that what we put there is going to go far, it's going to go fast, and it's going to be sticky. It's going to stay there wherever it goes somehow. And we will have to live with that digital footprint going forward. So I think that it should not be something we fear. And in fact, I often argue with folks in the tech community who, with the best of intentions, are talking about internet safety. And I push back and I say, we should stop talking about internet safety, because it presumes the internet is unsafe. And what we should be talking about is internet mastery. We should be talking about using this tool in an effective way. We don't teach kids to use power saws by starting with "don't cut your hand off." We don't teach kids to drive cars by saying "don't run over people." We teach them to use these powerful tools when they are old enough to both need them and to handle them responsibly. And we teach them in ways that are shared with us. We sit in the front seat of the car with our kids, white knuckled, while they try to move it down the street. And so I think that we need to really rethink not only our kids' relationship with these devices, but our own relationship, in the sense that we need to take the responsibility to help them use it well. And they can use it well. And in fact, these days, kids are much more sophisticated and worldly in terms of their understanding of politics and things of that nature, because of these tools. But we also have to be conscious of what we are modeling for them. And so if we are busy staring at our smartphone and yelling at them, "Stop playing Grand Theft Auto, it's awful," we're sending a message that is, it's okay for me, but it's not okay for you. And instead, we should be playing that game with them and teaching them through the experience of why you might not want to rehearse stealing cars all afternoon. So I think that what we really need to do, as I say to people, instead of developing killer apps, we should develop our killer bees. And those are: be balanced in our use, be mindful in our use it in directed, focused way, but above all, particularly for parents, but for any relationships, be present. The biggest problem I see with these devices is it pulls us away from each other, because we are either involved in staring at that screen, or thinking about what just came over it, or thinking about what we're about to put on it. And we're distracted from each other.
Yeah, we have so we have one more question that's come through YouTube, and then a final question, because we're a little bit over. I hope that's okay. And then a final question for Thomas, and then probably wrap. But Dr. Rich, you sort of covered a bit of this with your last response. What ways can we help our youth expand their imagination during the digital age? What are we currently doing, and what are we not doing? Is the question.
Bring back boredom. I've gotten so used to stimulating ourselves 24/7 by we can't get into an elevator or on a bus without pulling out our smartphone and looking at it. And if there isn't any message directed to us, there's always news, there's always memes, there's always Quora, there are things to do on it. And so instead of giving ourselves the space to think the new, we look at this and we accept whatever comes over it. So we are essentially ceding our minds and our hearts to other people, to complete strangers, and whatever they put out there. And boredom is where creativity and imagination happen, not just because it gives the empty space to move into, but because it's a little uncomfortable. And so instead of medicating ourselves with memes, why not think the new? Why not take that space and really, think of something that's never been thought of before? And I'm really worried that we are losing our abilities to do reflective thinking, to imagine, because it's so much easier to fill that space with something else.
Absolutely. And just a final question for Thomas, because I think, by the end of this film, I sort of felt a close connection with Pionki. You've seen him go through some interesting, the dating experience, and he's just trying to come into his own at a time, where there's all this technology. Have you thought about continuing to follow him on his journey? Is there any talk of that?
Well, I don't know, but many people ask me, so this seems maybe obvious, but I think I'm going to do other stuff and try to let time pass and maybe go back in a few years for sure. And if there's something interesting, then I'm going to decide. I don't want to take a decision right now, but yeah, I'm definitely going to go and keep in contact with him and let it go depending on what's going on in the next years.
Well, thank you both. Thank you for the beautiful film, Sing Me a Song. Again, if you haven't seen it, or your friends and family are looking for something amazing to watch, it's streaming at coolidge.org or at a local art house near you. So thank you again, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.